Oh boy, some of these seem like a bad idea, in theory, but who really knows? Today what we're doing is we're going over to an article on CanucksArmy.com published by Stephen Rodgett, who went out there and wrote about 4 players that might be worth PTO consideration for the Vancouver Canucks. Now, the title of this piece says 4 more players, which indicates that there were a few other players beforehand that were also written about too. And if you do some quick searching on Canucks Army, you'll find some other articles like this one from Tyson Cole, 5 UFAs that the Canucks could add on to PTOs this offseason. That was 3 days ago. 2 days ago, there was the Rodgett piece that we're going to look at in today's video, because there are a few names amongst this group of 4 guys that I wanted to dive into the most. 2 in particular, you can see them in the thumbnail, because when it comes to the Vancouver Canucks and additions they could make to their squad, it's honestly pretty reasoned out at this point where everybody falls into place and what roles are going to be taken up by what guys. I think for most Vancouver Canucks fans looking at the roster right now, most people can agree that the forwards are pretty much set, right? Assuming everybody is healthy and assuming that most people stay healthy throughout the year, there is already a pretty established group of, let's say, 13, 14, maybe even 15 guys that will be the pool of 12 forwards that the Vancouver Canucks use in all 82 games this season. There isn't going to be some extra random guy that comes out of nowhere. There are just too many guys already that are good enough to play. It's why Vasily Podkolzin was traded yesterday. Straight up, you could say that his job on the team was not going to be all too secure. Now, when it comes to defense, this is where things get a little bit interesting, because while it is true that you could say the Vancouver Canucks have a similar structure on D, there are 6-7 guys that you could realistically project to being the defensemen for the Vancouver Canucks in 2024-2025. Hughes Hronek, Susie Myers, Forbort Desharnais, and then you could go with some other guys there too, like Noah Juleson and Mark Friedman, who are still in the system as well. There is a little bit more volatility, I would say, on defense. Not necessarily because they are lacking guys, but because you could say they may be lacking better guys. Tyler Myers is the biggest outlier here as a top 4 option for the Canucks, and his contract extension that he was given, which I honestly think is pretty good, was ridiculed by most other Canucks media people and fans. I think common consensus is not the same as what I feel. I actually kind of like the contract, but it really does seem like I'm in the minority here. Same we could say about Vinny Desharnais. A lot of people don't really like that signing, but I'm kind of okay with it. I seem to like everything that PATRIK ALLVIN has done so far. Go figure. But when it comes to the names that the Canucks could potentially add that are written about in this Canucks Army article, there are some intriguing ones that I do think are worth discussing. Starting out with the first name, Mark Giordano, 40 years old, left-handed D, 6 feet 205, who had an $800,000 cap hit with the Maple Leafs last year. He had 9 points in 46 games, averaging 16:37 time on ice, and who had a 54% Corsi. Now, you're looking at Mark Giordano, and you see him pop up on the screen. You're like, okay, wait a minute, no, that guy stunk with Toronto. He was really bad. And honestly, I would agree. Mark Giordano in Toronto was not the same Mark Giordano that was winning the Norris Trophy and was a 70, 80-point guy with the Calgary Flames. Totally night and day difference, also like half a decade's worth of difference in terms of time since that happened. I think most people will remember the Toronto version of Mark Giordano as really not being effective, but what really stands out to me is that 54% Corsi. That's really good, especially for a guy who put himself in the spots that he did as a member of the Maple Leafs. And that's not even talking about the age. The guy's 40 years old. And it's actually what Rodgett goes out there and starts off with in this article. There are those who will look at the age of Mark Giordano and already give him a hard pass, which is understandable. Because not only is he 40 years old, he'll also turn 41 on October 3rd before the regular season even begins. So, why does he make this list? 3 reasons. 1, Giordano has already announced the intention to play this season, and he has made it clear he is not ready for retirement. 2, despite a decreased role for the Maple Leafs last season, Giordano performed pretty well. Not Norris Trophy level, of course, but Giordano did have among the highest defensive results in the entire Maple Leafs blue line, including a 57% control of high-danger chances against medium-quality competition. I didn't know that. That's a really good piece of info there. 3. The Canucks currently don't have a lot of depth at left-handed D. Next up behind Quinn Hughes is Carson Soucy and Derek Forbort, and then you have yourselves Christian Wolanin or Guillaume Brisebois. Giordano immediately sticks out as a higher quality and certainly more reliable option, especially if playing every night is not the expectation. It also is good, I would say, that Giordano has put himself in a spot where he knows he's going to play, he's getting ready, and he's going to be available. Kind of unlike the Phil Kessel situation that we had seen from last season. All memes aside, that was a really interesting development for the Vancouver Canucks to explore. It's just unfortunate that it didn't work out because Kessel's conditioning wasn't up to snuff. Now for Giordano, this is a guy whom, if you wanted to say would fit in on this blue line, I would say that he's a lot more reliable than a Mark Friedman or a Brisebois, but you just gotta make sure he's able to keep up. 41 years old is a pretty big doozy. Now, the other guy that I wanted to talk about in this video that was also written about in the article happens to also be a Toronto Maple Leafs guy, go figure. You saw him in the thumbnail, it's John Klingberg. Right-handed defenseman, 32 years old, $4.15 million was his cap hit in Toronto, and he only had 14 games played and 5 points. 54% Corsi as well, but Klingberg was really hampered down by injuries, which is why his entire stint with the Maple Leafs seems to have been a disaster when, realistically, if he actually played the entire year and he was as effective as he could have been, I don't want to say he would have been that bad, it's just health. We bumped Klingberg further down this list just so we didn't have 3 entries in a row that amount to, this player shoots right and makes passes from the blue line. At least Klingberg has a few advantages over Justin Schultz and Tyson Barrie, whom we also discussed about in another video, in that Klingberg is younger and has more recent examples of high-quality play under his belt. Klingberg is also a total question mark, though, after missing most of the 23-24 season with injury recovery. He's probably the most high-risk, high-reward player available. Then again, PTOs are, by their very nature, not high-risk, and if the Canucks want to get their hands on a good puck-moving defenseman as opposed to just a passable one, then a bouncing-back Klingberg is the only real option available on the market. Of course, though, you have to actually get a Klingberg who bounces back and not just a Klingberg, period. A little bit of a difference there, but of course, there is risk attached to taking a chance on most guys. For Jonathan Klingberg, though, his entire development was stunted by that recent season, and it's in a spot where you could start to say may have been a huge mistake. Might I remind you that John Klingberg was offered a really big contract extension with the Dallas Stars that he did not sign. He had 47 points in 74 games played in that final year with Dallas, but inevitably decided to take his talents over to Anaheim, signing a short-term deal. Eventually he was on Minnesota too, getting traded at the deadline, and then in Toronto he only had 14 games. He could have had a really big, beefy, expensive contract extension with the Stars, but he just didn't take it, which was very unfortunate for him with hindsight in 2024. Klingberg, of course, is most notable for his 67-point campaign in 2017-18, where he had 8 goals and 59 assists. This number doesn't seem like the craziest thing out there, especially when you compare it to all the defensemen getting 70, 80, 90 even point seasons in the NHL. There are multiple guys in the NHL that are capable of doing that nowadays. But in this 17-18 year, John Klingberg was one of only 3 guys to hit 67 points on the year. Yeah, that's how scoring was down back then in 2017-18 for defenseman productivity. Klingberg led the entire defense class in the league in assists. Yeah, try to compare that to Quinn Hughes, who this previous season led the NHL in defenseman assists with 75. So the league is changing, right? John Klingberg, though, he was unfortunately not a part of that because he got injured. Either way, he is still available in the free agent market as a potential PTO option, and I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about Klingberg? How do you feel about Mark Giordano, former Calgary Flames captain and superstar caliber player who is already really old? Klingberg was not really that. He was never attaining the Mark Giordano #1 defenseman in the league status, Norris winner caliber guy, but he was still really good at a certain part of his career. He's been hurt, though. Giordano's just old. There's a difference there. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How do you think either of these guys could fare for the Vancouver Canucks? If they were to sign any PTOs and you had the choice as to who they would be, would Klingberg or Giordano be one of your choices? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. 99 and bye.